Hey there YouTube. So today we're working on an 83 Volkswagen Vanagon. This is the 1.9 liter water cooled, and what we're dealing with here is idle control. If you find yourself constantly messing around with this screw right here on where the throttle bore is, you're probably dealing with an issue with a couple possibilities. You either have an air intake hose that has a crack on it. Let's see if I can find this one. This one's in a funny spot. Where is it hiding? Right there. So let's see if I can focus in there. At different temperatures, the engine's vibrating and moving about, and it's letting air in through this little tiny crack. It's hard to see. Right there. Okay. When this thing's installed, it actually opens up quite a bit more because your idle air or your mass airflow sensor is mounted here and the hose is mounted in between here. It's a really short distance and the engine shakes quite a bit. So what you get is this little gap in here opens up far too much, lets in air that the computer doesn't know about, because basically the computer on these older ones, which is located right down in there, the computer on this is just basically an idle control computer. So there's several different components. You know, you have your throttle switches here. This is an off idle switch. As soon as you touch the gas, this little plate will move this direction, open up, and send a signal to the computer there. You also have an idle valve here, which is mounted right where the coolant is. So this is a coolant hose. It warms this up. Plus there's also a component where there is, let's see if I can zoom in there without too many shadows. It's really hard to see at this angle, but there's a plug-in right here at the tip of this finger that goes onto this idle valve. And this idle control valve has air coming, vacuum coming from the intake manifold. Where is it? Right here. This is the vacuum hose. Comes along, goes to there, and the other end comes along up here and tees into, where is the hose? It tees into this fitting here on the air intake stream. So basically what I had found on this one, since you can't even see this plug-in down here hardly even when you're got the air hose off and the mass airflow sensor off, I noticed that the one of the pins, there's two wires I should say, the black wire with the pin had come right out of the plug-in because the wiring harness was pulled a little too tight around the backside underneath the throttle body, and it pulled one of the pins out. So I managed to force it back in using the tip of an O-ring pick, like so. There we go. And forced it back in, and then used some zip ties, since I didn't have a little spring clip, to pull wrap one zip tie around the plug-in, one zip tie around the hose with the hose clamp, and then another zip tie to pull the two together to keep the plug-in pushed into the fitting on the idle air valve. So we're hoping that's going to fix the idle, with a new air hose like this being ordered. Now, finding brand new ones is just about impossible. Used ones, not so good an idea if they're stiff like this. This is hard plastic now instead of the nice supple rubber. I'll show you one off of an 86, I believe. 86s don't fit, they're a different design. You can tell by when you're looking at the part that clamps onto the mass airflow. These two are at a 45 degree. Let's see if I can get this right. At a 45 degree like that, whereas the original one, 83 to 85, are straight up and down like that. And used ones are not usually a good idea because there's usually a crack involved. You can repair the cracks in an emergency using windshield urethane, primerless urethane for bonding windshields. It's black, comes in caulking gun sizes. They're usually around $20 a tube. You can buy it at a glass shop if you really need to, and you got to clean this off with brake cleaner and rags until it's perfectly, flawlessly clean. And then you can squirt some in there and feather it in, and hopefully it holds. It bonds windshields to a body, so you know it's more than strong enough. But there's also a website called CIP1.com or .ca if you're in Canada, and you can order new ones for the I don't know about the 86 model, but the 83 to 85 model has an exact match. It's an aftermarket everything looks like it's the right diameter from the photos I've seen, so that's a solution. So you have to stop air leakage between the mass airflow sensor and the throttle body, and with that crack on there, that's going to cause a lot of issues. So at different temperatures, you're going to be constantly adjusting this. It's going to be stalling, and that's assuming, of course, you don't have a single bubble of air in the cooling system, which has to be burped out from the radiator end. I'll show you that right now. I've taken the front grille off to show you. So there's the headlight. So there's a grill that goes along here. It comes off with just a few screws that turn a little bit there. You turn it like half a turn or one full turn at the top, and there's 5 of them there and then over there, and then the whole thing comes out at the top and then just lifts straight out. That accesses the top of the radiator right here. And on the passenger side, there's this little nut. It's a 14 mil or 9/16, so it fitted as well. Just use a wrench to crack it. There's a little steel washer in there, and you can run the engine until coolant starts leaking out, or you can just keep this completely off and then pour a little coolant in there until it starts to overflow. It's a very small hole, difficult angle trying to get a funnel in there, so it would have to be a really long, super skinny funnel for it to work properly. Transmission funnel might work with if you're pouring incredibly slowly. Another thing to look is on these vehicles, this is the only burp place that I know to burp air out. It's incredibly critical to burp every drop of air out of the cooling system, or you're constantly going to be having issues, and you cannot have any leaks. Most vehicles, you get a leak in your radiator, like right here, between these cooling fans are all wet with antifreeze. It's hard to see on the video, but yeah, I guess you can see it there, and you're getting a lot of rot here. So we have another radiator we're going to put in here. And there's the fan switch that activates the fan. It's got power on 24/7, doesn't matter if the ignition's on or not. And it has a low speed circuit and a high speed circuit. Power comes in on this side. Middle one lets power through from the fan switch, which is threaded into the radiator there. You can just see it right there, that brass switch. Middle one powers up to low speed, and the outer one at the bottom left here in this case, it's a skinnier of the 3 wires. What it does is it sends power. As soon as it triggers a high speed, it sends power up the wiring harness in underneath the dash, and there's a relay right this side of the dash piece. You have to take this plastic cover off. It lifts right up if you're very careful, and there's a relay in there. I'll show you what it looks like. It's a pretty simple relay. All these things work together. So this is a Intermotor FC588T. Wait, that's the flash relay. I apologize. Okay, so that's for fixing the signal lights, but there is a relay available still that they're manufacturing for the high-speed fan, and they also come with pigtails, where there's optional part, but the pigtails burn out on a constant basis, so you'd have to get all that air out, or else it's not going to idle properly, and it's going to overheat. And so once you get all that done and you've ruled out any air bubbles anywhere, this tank has to be right full. This tank underneath the license plate, which you can access through this cap right here, that has to be right full, and you have to keep running it, run the heater, maybe park it uphill so that it's nose up, and then you can get the air burped out a lot easier with the engine running at maybe 2,000 RPM to let the air work its way up these hoses that go underneath the body, down this way and straight through all the way up to the radiator. So there's a lot of components on these that you have to be aware of to make sure that the idle speed is perfect, it's not overheating, and if you're getting that flashing red light, that usually means a couple things. It's either A, overheating, or B, the coolant is low on this tank, and this tank is not actually located in the proper place. It's been temporarily screwed onto the fuse relay box, which is not proper. There's supposed to be a bracket here. I do believe this little plastic tab is supposed to go into a rubber mounted bracket, but that bracket has been removed, so we're going to have to modify some sheet stock. That's pretty thick. It's an eighth or 3/16 thick, and you can mount it underneath here. Don't drill it through here, as this is one piece of sheet metal. There's no hollow space, so the screws would come right through. But if you're looking under here to find a place to mount one of these, if you're encountering the same issue, there's this piece of sheet metal here that there's room. You can drill straight up to there. We're at just below the edge of the gasket for the engine cover, And then you can bend and shape these, drill some holes once everything's all in place. And the cap here is not higher than the deck level because you've got an insulated engine cover here that you've got to account for the thickness. I don't know if that's the spot for the cap or not, but it looks like it's pretty close because the clamp where it latches on is here, so the radiator tank is right about there somewhere. So I'm assuming that's the hollow for it. But if you mount it in the proper place here where it's actually level, you won't have air pockets on the top here that keeps triggering this water sensor. It just basically checks the resistance, and when it hits a certain amount of resistance, it knows it's got coolant there, and it'll shut the flashing red light off for temperature on the dash. So there's a lot of things you have to make sure of. You have no vacuum leaks. Some of these clamps, you can see them, these are the original style here. They've got it's sort of like a CV axle clamp. You just pinch it together and it tightens. The ones on this side were actually missing, and putting liquid propane, turning a propane torch upside down on lit around these with the engine running made the engine RPM speed up. So I put regular hose, these are stainless steel hose clamps, around it to tighten those up. And other possibilities for vacuum leaks are at the pinch weld along in here, or any of these hoses anywhere, just anywhere. So you have to double check that these original hoses are not cracked, where you can tell they're original because they have this braided component to it. This one's quite soft. It's going to need replacing. It may be collapsed inside. So replacing these with new vacuum hose would be a good idea. You also have to be aware that these plastic tubes can crystallize and crack and break. These original Volkswagen ones from the 80s are actually quite good shape. So I'm assuming they're using a better plastic that doesn't react with heat as badly as some of the newer, as some of the same vintage Fords and Chevys and Dodges and whatnot. So once you've ruled out all vacuum leaks, you can check that afterwards with a fully sealed system using a propane torch unlit, and just turn it upside down, and just as the engine's idling at a smooth, steady rate that you know that everything's smooth and leveled out, you can just bring the propane vapor around all the connections where there may be. This is the intake manifold. Technically it's just mounted externally, but it's still vacuum. So you got to make sure there's no leaks there. At the distributor down here, or at the fuel pressure regulator here, or at the intake manifold port down here where the fuel pressure regulator hose goes into this blue intake manifold here. It may not be blue on yours. So once you've solved all those issues and made sure that all your spark plug wires are good, your coil contact for your coil wires in here is good, and all these connectors that plug onto the coil. Let's move this air hose out. Let's see if we can get a good shot in there. All these blade connectors here and here, they all have to be nice and clean. And sometimes you find a lot of corrosion in here, and the little spring clip that's in the tip of that spark plug wire will have rotted off and be solid rust, and you're getting 20% of your spark coming through this main coil wire to your distributor cap. And anytime you look under these and you see rusty little pins on the end, let's pull one off to show you. Now I've scooped these up with dielectric silicone. Spark plug tune-up grease is another name for it. I'm trying to get this to focus, but I'm a little too close. But there's a little tiny spring pin on there through the center of this, and if that's not in good shape and super rusty, you're going to have issues with getting connection through to your distributor cap. So once you've checked all that out and made sure you've got all that done, this idle screw should not be needing to be adjusted anymore. And this bottom, by the way, on these models 83 to 85, remind you that's your idle switch. So once you get a little bit past the idle, it'll trigger a signal to tell the computer that you're off idle. And these two here are your full speed enrichment for boosting your injector flow. And you just see where the trigger is down there. There's a little roller wheel right at the tip of my finger. The light is really bad here, right there. And so that comes on when you go full throttle. But one thing to look for, as is in this case, which we're going to be replacing this later, is pins that wobble up and down like that. It's moving right in here. So this one's kind of solid, just the plug-in wobbles, and this one, the riveting has come loose right here. So those are all components that need to be changed. And as you probably have already encountered, you're not going to find that many good service manuals for this other than the original one, and it's probably not as familiar to you as some of the newer ones. So if you got any questions, don't hesitate to post them up on the video, and please give us a like and a follow, and we've got more videos coming often. Have a good day.